They established the monetary system that we have today, because I think there were plans to grow the size of the government, allow the government to grow where we would be doing more things than we should be doing overseas, and involved in the redistribution of wealth and the welfare system. But they knew that taxes would never be enough, so therefore they would have another vehicle. They also knew the limitations of borrowing. Jefferson argued the case at the Constitutional Convention that we shouldn't even be able to borrow. Unfortunately, he lost that argument. But what they set up in 1913 was this ability, if government needed to grow or somebody wanted to grow, if taxes didn't cover the bills and the borrowing was difficult because interest rates were rising, they had a special little trick. They would invent this idea of a central bank. And they would invent this thing that we would have a Federal Reserve System. And if you needed money, you just called up the Fed, and the politicians would say, hey, we spent too much. How about buying these treasury bills? Where are you going to get the money? I said, oh, we'll just create it out of thin air. Used to be, we called it the printing press, and they printed the money. Today, they just call up a computer, and they create billions and billions of dollars. It's a dependency that has gone in this country out of control, out of spending. This is the reason I argue, not only for the case for auditing the Fed, but with serious intent to get rid of the Federal Reserve System. Against the Federal Reserve, which I do for economic reasons and constitutional reasons. Economically, they cause the business cycle, and they cause the booms and the busts and the inflation and the unemployment. So that's a pretty strong economic argument. But constitutionally, it's obviously there. There's no authority to create a central bank. If you don't have the authority, you're not allowed to do it. But there's a major moral issue here, too. And that is, when you duplicate the units of account, the units of money, if you did it, what would it be called? It would be called counterfeiting. So it's a moral issue. And if you've ever read the little booklet called The Law by Bastiat, Bastiat said, if you can't do it, the government's not allowed to do it either. So it is immoral to counterfeit money. And we also know that this is a very biblical issue as well. It isn't something in modern economics. It didn't come with Austrian economics. It didn't come with free market economics of the 20th century. It's been known for a long time. It was known in the Old Testament, the New Testament, that we were supposed to have honest weights and measures. You weren't allowed to defraud your customer. So there's many arguments against a Federal Reserve System, but one of the consequences of this, it facilitates the growth of big government, because it delays and it distorts who pays the bills. If we had a system where all of us had to pay all our taxes on a routine basis for all the government we're getting, believe me, this nonsense would end rather quickly. One time in Congress, I introduced a bill that would address this sort of with tongue-in-cheek. I wanted to get rid of the withholding tax for several reasons. Why should a businessman be forced by the government to be the tax collector, keep all the records, and turn them over to the government, and then if the government thinks they're flawed, then you have to prove yourself innocent. So this is something that has been going on for too long. But when the tax authorities, or when they can't collect enough revenues, if you had to pay, if we the people had to pay for all the government, whether it was the entitlement system or for our militarism around the world, if we had to pay for it, every one of us at the end of every month send in a check. Believe me, it would end rather quickly. But what do we do? We first use the borrowing tool, and then that is limited. If you had a gold standard where they couldn't print money, if the government spent too much money, interest rates would go up. And the government would say, hey, what are you guys doing? You're hurting the monetary system. So you'd have to quit. So the whole purpose of the monetary way, or the inflationary way of paying for these bills, is to make it difficult for people to understand who's paying the bills and who's suffering and who's benefiting. There's always a benefit to some people when you destroy the value of the money. Since 1913, we've lost 98% of the value of a 1913 dollar. That is a consequence of the Federal Reserve. Now, I am convinced of the argument that when you destroy the value of the currency, you transfer wealth from one group to another, just automatically. Because some people get the money first, and then the people who get it second, it circulates and the prices go up, and they suffer more than others. If you could double the money supply, and prices went up twice as much, and your salaries went up twice as much, it wouldn't be a big deal, but that's not the way it happens. What happens is some people benefit. During the bubble formation with the housing bubble, people on Wall Street benefited. You know, the mortgage companies and the Fannie Mae's and the Freddie Macs, and they benefited to a large degree by this system. But the people who suffered the most are suffering now. The people who ended up, they were supposed to be getting help, you know, with, we're going to make credit easy, we're going to have these affirmative action programs, everybody's going to have a house. Well, guess what? Those people that were supposed to be helped, they lost their jobs, they lost their houses, and guess who got bailed out? The people on Wall Street got bailed out, and under sound economic principle and sound moral principle, you don't bail out people who are ripping us off and dumping it on the tax.